Today we're going to be working on all of those jump up, jump backs, jump throughs that are so ubiquitous in all kinds of traditions of vinyasa practice. So we're going to do a lot of exercises that are geared towards strengthening and getting the coordination for those intense moves. Now, and we're going to place them right on the upper corners of your mat, kind of in front of where your hands would go for, say, a downward facing dog. So they're going to be in the highest, tallest setting for now. And go ahead and set up in your downward facing dog with like the skin of the tips of your fingers right at the back edge of the block there, and then come into downward facing dog. So from here, we're going to come out to a plank pose and bring the shoulders right over the wrists. We're going to check our alignment of our plank pose and make sure shoulders, elbows, wrists are aligned, and also shoulders, hips, heels are aligned. Then once we have that nice plank pose alignment, we're going to touch the knees down to the floor. Now, don't adjust your knees from here. They're actually in the right spot where they are, even though it feels like they're really far back there. But don't be tempted to shift them forward or to shift the hands back. Just keep them as is. Now, as you bend the elbows back, you're going to bring the front part, the round part of the tops of the shoulders, of the fronts of the shoulders, right down to the blocks and let them rest there. You can even let the blocks sort of catch your weight a little bit. Now, here's the hard part. Press your hands down and lift back up to hands and knees. I know, it's harder than it looks. And then go ahead, touch the shoulders to the blocks again. Good, that's it. And then lift back up. This is really good practice for, you guessed it, chaturanga. So bend the elbows straight back, let the weight of the shoulders touch down to the blocks, and then this time, third time's a charm, let the blocks hold you up a little bit and then extend your legs back into your chaturanga dandasana shape. So memorize this feeling, memorize it well, bring your knees to the floor and take a short rest. Good. So one of the things that we're practicing is just the height of the chaturanga that we want. We don't want to go too much further down towards the floor than where the blocks are holding us up. Right? And then the other thing we want to practice is we want to practice how far forward the chest is coming in chaturanga. I think a lot of times we forget that it's, instead of sort of an up and down movement, meaning I'm lowering myself towards the floor, it's actually got a lot of forward to back energy, meaning the chest is reaching forward and the legs are reaching back. Let's try it again and see if we can feel that in our bodies. So set up again with the fingers behind the blocks and then press back into your downward facing dog. So again, come out to a plank pose, and first, before you do anything else, just check the alignment of the plank pose, arm bones straight up and down, body like a nice plank, and then set the knees down, and remember, don't adjust the hands or the knees at this point. And then you're going to carry the chest really forward so that the shoulders can touch the blocks as you bend down. Yep. That's it. And then lift back up on the hands and knees. It's good practice. And then again, touch the fronts of the shoulders down onto the blocks. And then lift back up, hands and knees. And third time's a charm as usual. Shoulders to blocks. This time, leave the shoulders where they are. Start to extend the legs into your chaturanga. Memorize that feeling. Good. And then release the knees to the floor. Okay. One other way to think about the position of the chest in relationship to the arms in chaturanga is almost imagine that you want the forearm bones, the lower part of the arm, to stay vertical to the floor. So Kate's going to demonstrate that again. But imagine, once you have the elbow over the wrist, imagine that this part stays stuck, frozen in space. You're not going to move that part. In fact, let's show what we're not going to do, which is bend the elbows back and let the position of the lower arm change. Instead, we're going to imagine again that those forearm bones are stuck in space and that we're carrying the chest forward over the position of the forearm bones in order to make our chaturanga. Okay, lift up off of those blocks. Let's take the blocks away and just try it without the blocks. Hooray. Okay. So come into your downward facing dog. Now, imagine that the blocks are still there. So imagine you have these sort of invisible blocks that are holding space for you. So you never want to go lower than where the blocks were holding up the shoulders a moment ago. Let's try that. So come forward into your plank pose, and then just for practice, set the knees down on the floor. And then practice, again, carrying the chest and the shoulders forward as you lower the shoulders just to that spot where the blocks were holding you up before, and then lift up to hands and knees. Good. And again, lower the shoulders forward and down. Try to pull the shoulder blades a little bit away from the neck. Beautiful. And then lift back up. Good. Okay, you know the rules. Third time's a charm. Bring the chest forward and down, shoulders hovering right where those blocks were holding you. Now lift your knees up, chaturanga. Amazing and perfect. Okay, knees to the floor and take a rest. Good. So practicing the alignment of chaturanga is going to be critical for some of the hopping forward and back, just so that we know exactly where we're going when we do these hops, right? So let's just practice let's practice going through the downward dog plank pose chaturanga sequence, okay? So start in a downward facing dog. And then go ahead and come out to your plank pose. And then keeping the legs extended, go ahead and lower the shoulders forward and down. Don't lower past where the blocks would be holding you. And then let's transition into upward facing dog. So shoulders back, straighten arms, point the toes. Good, and then go all the way back, downward facing dog. Good, bring the knees to the floor for a moment. So that sequence again comes up time and time again in most sort of vinyasa style sequences. So it's worth kind of going through and refining our alignment and refining our understanding. You know, one thing that that comes up a lot in yoga practice, especially as vinyasa practice, is how to use the hands and the wrists. And so we're going to take a moment now to strengthen up the hands and to talk a little bit about the sort of optimal ways to use the hands when we're going through this vinyasa practice. So start on your hands and knees. Okay, this one's a little tricky. Not to do, but to understand. So imagine you want to keep your 4 fingers of your hands down on the floor and the knuckles that join your fingers to your hand down on the floor, but you want to lift the wrist and the palm of the hand up away from the floor. And now it's tempting to let the thumbs press down, but don't let them. In fact, pretend you just don't have thumbs for this one. Okay, now slowly try to lower the palms of the hands down onto the yoga mat at exactly the same time. Good. And then try to lift them up simultaneously. Good. And repeat. So lower them down and try to release them down at exactly the same time. And again, simultaneously lifting up. Keep doing that on your own. So you might notice while you're doing these hand push-ups, wrist push-ups, that one arm is a little bit stronger, and it wants to sort of naturally do more of the work, but we're not going to indulge its preferences, right? We're going to try to keep the weight on the hands really nice and even. Again, trying to lift up at exactly the same nanosecond and lower down at exactly the same nanosecond. Okay, so lift up again, and then keep the palms of the hands lifted. Now, imagine you want to lower the heel of the hand down just about halfway from where it is now. So there should be like 2 centimeters of space between the skin of the palm of the hand and the floor. Now, move your shoulders all the way forward over your fingertips. That is so hard. And then shift your shoulders back. Whew. Okay, now from where the palms of your hands are now, lower them again halfway. So now you only have maybe a centimeter or maybe a finger's width distance. Like if I could come and sort of stick a finger under the palm of the hand, you would be lifting up about that much. And again, shift your shoulders all the way forward over the tips of your fingers. Your forearms are working so strongly. and then shift the weight back. Now, lower the skin of the palm of the hand down onto the floor, but imagine that you still want more of the weight to sort of transfer through the knuckles and through the fingers. So that really, even though the skin of the palm of the hand is touching the yoga mat, you're not taking weight through that part of the hand. Does that make sense? Okay, hopefully. That's a hard thing to understand. So, again, super light touch in the heel of the hand and then shift the weight forward into the fingertips. It should feel as difficult as it did the first 2 times. Good, and then release. Okay, take a little break off the wrists. So, what we're trying to do is we're trying to wake up the muscles of the hands and the forearms so that the muscles are actually helping to hold us up rather than relying on the very delicate structures of the hand and the inner wrist. So very crucial to keep working on the strength of the hands and working on livening up the hands in practice, especially since we spend so much gosh darn time on our hands. So here's another way to practice that same idea. You can actually take your yoga mat and you can kind of fold like a couple of inches at a time and fold it under. And this is a pretty thick mat, so we might only need to fold like twice underneath. But if your mat is a little thinner, feel free to roll it up a couple of more times, even than that. Oops, let me do that again. Let's see. Okay, yeah, once, and then let's try twice. Okay, good. So what we've created here is a little ledge, or a big ledge in our case. And so that ledge is going to be a little ledge for our wrists. Now, yeah, good. So I want the very back edge of the palm of your hand to be on that ledge. And I want all of your knuckles and all of your fingers to be pressing down into the floor. Now, so think about reaching your fingers into the floor and reaching those knuckles into the floor. Now, it can be very tempting now that we have this like soft, cushy mat under the hands. It can be really tempting to just act like it's a pillow and dump the weight back down into the wrists and just let it be a way to like reinforce an already possibly bad habit. But instead, we're gonna use it actually as a reminder to lift up out of the wrists. So if you can imagine, instead of just being a cushion, it's trying to remind us to lift up and out, okay, energetically. So keep your hands like that and then press back to a downward facing dog so we can see how that feels. Good. So again, from inside, you're trying to kind of lift up and out of the wrists. Lots of energy in the wrists and the forearm bones, traveling all the way up the body. And the knuckles are pressing down and the fingers are pressing down into the floor. You can even practice like this in your class. In fact, watch. Let's try this. Step your right foot forward into Warrior One. And look, your foot will just kind of hold your mat there while you step forward. Lift all the way up. And then as you step back into Chaturanga, put your hands exactly back down where they came from. So knuckles down, very ledge of the hand on the floor, on the mat, excuse me. Yep, knuckles, Chaturanga, give it a try. Okay, here's the hard part, upward facing dog. Knuckles down, wrists up. That's the hardest one for almost everybody I've met. And then go all the way back, downward facing dog. Let's do the other side just so we're even, right? Left foot forward, reach up, Warrior One. Okay, and then hands to the mat. Let the wrists lift up as the knuckles press down. Step into plank pose and lower Chaturanga. Okay, upward dog. Don't let those knuckles lift up. Good, and downward facing dog. Well done. Okay, bring the knees down to the floor. And then for the time being, we're going to unroll this mat. But, you know, for a couple of weeks when I first learned this technique, I just would use it during my sun salutations in class. So feel free to, you know, take a moment just to roll up the mat and do a couple of sun salutations just until you really get used to using the hands and the wrists in this sort of new, more dynamic way. Okay, so Now we're going to work a little bit on hopping from downward dog. So we're going to take our blocks again, only this time we're going to start on the lowest setting. And I'm going to have you step into a downward facing dog with your hands on your hips. Okay. So we're going to play a little game. We'll call it stilt legs. So imagine you want to keep your legs totally and absolutely straight, right? So no bending the knees. Just try to walk your feet as far forward towards the blocks as you can without bending your knees. Yep. And without lifting your hands up either. Yes. Oh, good job. Wow, Kate's getting pretty far up there. You can put your heels down. Yep. Kate made it pretty far up towards her blocks, but even if you don't make it all the way up, that's okay. I want to bring your attention mainly to how hard the muscles of the abdomen, the lower abdomen especially, are working, and how hard the muscles of the legs have to work. It's actually surprising to feel kind of all of that muscular effort of the legs, and maybe even some muscles we forgot about, right? So go ahead, walk all the way back to downward facing dog. So again, no matter how far you walk forward, bring your attention again to the lower abdomen and to the legs. Super strong. Go ahead, walk forward. Straight legs like stilts, like you're walking on stilts. Good. Don't lift your hand up, not even a little bit. Kate's an expert. She's walking all the way up there. Good. And then go ahead and walk all the way back. Okay. So I want you to remember all of that sort of muscular wakefulness and engagement as we start to move towards hopping. The next step, I want you to sort of visually divide the space between your hands and your feet. So find like a halfway point between your hands and your feet. Just kind of mark it mentally. We're going to take 2 hops, one to the middle, and then one as far up between the hands as you can get your feet. And if they don't make it all the way, don't worry, you're just going to step the rest of the way. So let's bend the knees a little bit. And then hop just to the halfway point to start. And then second hop, try to get between the blocks. But even if you don't quite make it, you can just step the feet up the rest of the way. Okay? Good. Walk your feet all the way back. Let's give that one more try. So again, mark your halfway point. Let's do this. Let's lift the heels up high this time. And then we're going to bend the knees, but try to keep the hips up really high. Okay, now hop just to the halfway point. Yep. And then second hop, and even if you don't make it all the way up between the blocks at first, you're just going to step the feet the rest of the way so that they make it up there. Perfect. And then fold forward over the legs. Awesome. Walk back to downward facing dog. Okay, so now the big one. So you're going to try to make one hop as far, don't do it yet. You're going to try to do one hop all the way forward between your blocks. We're going to do a little bit of preparation. So I want you to lift your heels as high up as you can. Now, keep your heels lifting high. More importantly, keep your hips lifting up high. Bend your knees, but don't let your hips drop down. See if you can like stick your hips up even higher. Imagine like the way your cat looks when they're about to pounce on a string or something. And look between your blocks. So between your blocks is like that pouncing action you're gonna do. Okay, so like a cat, just pounce up there. Yes, oh good. And then again, even if you didn't make it the rest of the way, you're gonna tell the feet what to do by putting them the rest of the way up there. And eventually the feet will get the message. Okay, let's try that one more time for good luck. Okay, so we're gonna lift the heels high, bend the knees a little bit, but we're gonna stick the hips up as high as we can. Again, get that sort of cat pouncy energy going. And then take one big hop, and wherever you land, walk the rest of the way and fold forward. Okay, good. Step the feet back to downward dog. Let's try this together. So now that we've got the hang of that hopping forward thing, we're gonna hop forward again. This time, I want you to land as loud and as heavy as you possibly can. So bend your knees, get ready, and I want you to just, boom, land on the floor. Go. Yeah. Do that again. Walk your feet back. Do that again. Wake up your downstairs neighbors. Ready? Bend and give it a hop. There you go. Walk back to downward facing dog. This time, though, I want you to imagine that you're going to land as lightly and softly as you possibly can. Go ahead. Take that hop. Nice. Sounds totally different, and it feels different too, I bet. Walk back to downward facing dog. Let's do that one more time. So again, pretend there's like a baby sleeping next door, and you want to just land as effortlessly and softly as you can on the floor. Amazing. So good. Good. And then you can come onto your hands and knees and rest for a moment. So the amazing thing about that exercise to me is that we all know how to be heavy when we need to. We all know how to be light when we need to. And I didn't have to tell you a bunch of fancy anatomy in order to make that happen. All we had to do was change our intention. And just by changing our intention, the same action had two different results. So, of course, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the anatomy behind it because that's my job right now. But even if you go get a cup of tea during this part, don't worry. All you have to do, again, is tell your body with your intention that you want to land lighter, and you will, right? And then step by step, you'll land a little bit lighter, a little bit lighter, a little bit lighter, until it's just absolutely soundless, like a feather. So the thing that's happening, when we intend to land lightly is something that the ancient yoga texts called mula bandha. Mula bandha, it means something like root lock. And from a physiological standpoint, it usually happens automatically anytime we jump. So if we were jumping rope or playing basketball, usually the body automatically kicks in this muscular contraction that helps us stay sort of controlled and balanced as we land from hops. But just so that we're more informed, okay, so go ahead and sit on the ground in a cross-legged position. And if you rock side to side on the hard floor, you can sort of feel that there's two little sort of bony protrusions that kind of plug into the floor on the left and right side of the buttocks, yeah? So those two bony protrusions, for you anatomy nerds in the room, are called ischial tuberosities. Sometimes they're colloquially called sits bones. So you can find your right and left sit bone. And then in the back, you can find your tailbone, right? All the way at the base of your spine. Go ahead. And then in the front, you can find your pubic bone. It's just that hard part of where the two halves of the pelvis meet at the front of the body. So now imagine those 4 points. And if we were looking down at those 4 points, they'd almost make a bit of a diamond. So you'd have one sits bone, the other sits bone, you'd have the pubic bone on one side and the tailbone on the other side. So imagine that sort of diamond shape. Now we all have these very specialized muscles that if we were to sort of lift the center of that diamond shape up towards the center of the body, that's the muscular contraction that we sometimes call mula bandha in yoga. Now there's a part two. There's a secret part two. Part two is a muscle that goes around the abdominals. It's a very, very deep abdominal muscle, and the fibers of the muscle go this way. So when the fibers contract, they sort of pull everything in towards the center. So you could almost imagine the shape of a cummerbund or a corset, and if you were sort of to pull in from all directions at once, that's transversus abdominis. But it's a really subtle muscle. It's not a strong muscle. So if we're doing a big, strong abdominal contraction, it's probably not happening. It's so subtle that I want you to sort of feel how subtle this contraction is. If you put your pinky finger near your hip bone, the kind of crest of the pelvis, and then you put your thumb towards your belly button, even if they don't totally reach, just in that general direction, then right in the middle, put your pointer finger. So right where it wants to point, somewhere between your belly button and the crest of your pelvis. And then take an inhale. And as you exhale, we're going to go shh. And it's the subtlest thing, but you'll feel like a little lift back away from the tip of your finger almost. Very, very subtle. That's how subtle it is, and that's an incredibly deep muscle. So usually when we contract the pelvic floor, transversus abdominis co-contracts, but it's still interesting to know, or just in case that's not happening altogether, we can work on that. So, okay, so now that we know about that, let's also work on hopping back. Now, hopping back is its own special skill. So, to work on the hop backs, we're going to take a belt and we're going to put that belt across the yoga mat, just, maybe 6 or maybe 8 inches from the front of the yoga mat. And then I've also brought a coin. You can use a button or a coin, or sometimes if you have those like furniture dots that you put under the legs of the tables, if you have those lying around, those are really good. So you're going to stand right at the edge of the belt. For our purposes, we're going to have the toes right at the back edge of the belt. Yeah. And then just make sure, so this belt is going to be kind of like our starting line. So you want to make sure that fingers and toes always end up on the back edge. You can see how if you start confusing it with the front edge, then there's a little more room for error here. So go ahead and line up your fingertips on the same side of the belt as your toe tips. So the fingers and the toes are, again, all lined up along our starting line. Okay. So lift your head and chest and look as far forward as you can, maybe even come up onto fingertips for our purposes. There you go. And then from wherever your chin is, if you were to drop a plumb line straight down from the chin, that's where you're going to put your button or your coin or whatever you're using to mark the spot, right? It sometimes helps to have a second pair of eyes to see as well. Sometimes it's hard to measure where your own chin is in space. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Bend the knees a lot. Keep your chin right over your coin. Now, as you fling your legs back into chaturanga, your chin stays right over your coin. Go ahead. There we go. And then go into upward facing dog. The chin won't be over the coin anymore. And then go back downward facing dog. So give that another try. It's very interesting here. Go ahead and walk the feet forward. So for me, what this exercise helps me to understand is how much forward energy the chin and the chest have in chaturanga. I think because we're flinging our legs back in space, we sort of have this emotional understanding of chaturanga being a backward movement, but there's actually a tremendous amount of forward momentum as well, in counterbalance to the legs going back, actually. So let's give that another try. So we're going to do that preparation move. Lift the head and the chest. Look forward. Good. Now bend the knees. Keep that chin over your button and fling your legs back to chaturanga. Chin still over the button. Good. Upward facing and downward facing. Awesome. Wonderful. Go ahead and walk your feet forward towards your hands again. We're going to keep the belt and the coin there for the moment. Go ahead and come up to stand. Okay.